And the Speaker of Parliament, Bagbin, has described as abysmal Parliament's oversight performance Parliament performance of its oversight responsibilities over the executive. This he blames on the lack of capacity and inadequate resources for MPs to play their constitutional roles effectively. Inaugurating the 6-member Parliamentary Service Board for the 8th Parliament, the Speaker also revealed constant break-ins into vehicles of MPs and staff within the premises of Parliament because the House has no control over the enclave. He wants the entire enclave to be handed over to the legislature.
How efficient and effective is our Parliament? One of the areas that our Parliament has not fared well is oversight and private members' legislation. Even though the performance and effectiveness of Ghana's Parliament continue to be rated high internationally, its rating in the area of oversight is unsurprisingly low. I say it is unsurprising because Parliament and its committees lack the needed support and assistance to perform their oversight functions. I had calls in March this year to call out the Minister of Finance and the Secretary to the President for attempting to unilaterally place a ceiling on the budget appropriation for Parliament and the judiciary. I must admit, this unfortunate development has been the practice of almost all the governments since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. This development has undoubtedly affected the capacity of Parliament to effectively and efficiently perform its oversight duties. I admit that there has been some modest improvement in the appropriation for Parliament by successive governments, but it is still far inadequate to meet the optimal requirements of the House. In fact, there is no year that Parliament had even 1% of the total revenue of the country as an arm of government, not a ministry, an arm of government. The same for the judiciary. Again, in the area of private members' bills, I must admit that as a House, we have not helped ourselves because of the inadequate interpretation given to the Article 108 of the Constitution by previous speakers. The interpretation of what constitutes an, and I quote, imposition of a charge on the consolidated fund or other public funds, unquote, or, quote, the payment, issue, or withdrawal from the consolidated fund or other public funds, unquote, sought to place a fetter on the capacity of members to initiate and or present private members' bills for the consideration of the House. Even if the speakers at the time were to give Article 108 of the Constitution a more liberal and purposive interpretation, we did not have the technical personnel, the legislative draft persons within the service to assist members convert their thoughts into a legislative framework in the form of a bill. I recall that as a majority leader, I had to seek the expertise and services of Mrs. Ofuru Boateng, a retired director of legislative drafting at the Office of Attorney General, when I tried, supported by the Parliamentary Center, to introduce a private members' bill, the Budget Act, for the consideration of Parliament. It is in this respect that I commend my predecessor, Right Honorable Professor Aaron Mike Okwe, for breaking the jinx and pushing for the introduction and passage into law of the first private members' bill sponsored by members from both sides of the political divide in the House. I must commend Honorable Ras Mubarak, former Member of Parliament for Kumbungu, for the initiative to introduce the Private Members Bill to amend the Road Traffic Act. The majority and minority leaders at the time, Honorable Oseche Mensah-Bonsu and Honorable Haruna Idrisu, who were the joint sponsors, in addition to some other members, should also be commended for their leadership, which led to the passage of the landmark bill. It clearly shows that with cooperation from the two sides of the House, a lot can be achieved for the betterment of our country. I have no doubt that the introduction and passage into law of the first Private Members Bill has cleared the path for more of such bills to be introduced in the 8th Parliament. And I'm aware so many of them are already lined up for processing. This board must therefore work to enhance the capacity of the drafting unit of the Parliamentary Service to be able to support members in this endeavor. I'm aware the previous board and the boards before that have taken some initiatives to recruit and train a corps of legislative drivers for the service, but they are still a rare species in this country. The previous board requested the first Deputy Speaker, Honorable Joseph Osei-Wusu, and my good self to headhunt a qualified legislative draft person to head the drafting department. Unfortunately, none could be found. This board must vigorously pursue this endeavor and ensure that we do not only have a director to head the department, but that there are equally qualified and dedicated staff to man the department. Meanwhile, the board will have to rely on the wealth of knowledge and expertise of Ms. Estelle Appiah for the meantime. Looking ahead, this board must also work collectively and collaboratively to improve upon the work ethic of staff of the service. It is a fact that there are some hard-working employees of the service who are giving up their best for the service and Parliament. But it is equally true that there is a significant number whose contribution is nothing to write home about. There are some staff who basically have no schedules, and so virtually do nothing, yet are paid by the state at the end of each month. Monitoring and supervision by superiors are poor and must be improved if we are determined to attain the vision of being a model parliament in Africa. These are matters which I hope to lead this board on, to instill discipline and good work ethics among staff of the Parliamentary Service and also members of Parliament. I'm not oblivious to the concerns of staff pertaining to delays in promotions and career progression. We shall work assiduously to resolve these matters. There are undoubtedly some vacancies within the service arising from retirements, deaths, and so on, and we must work with dispatch to have these vacancies filled as soon as possible. That is one of the reasons why we need to set up the committees of the board at this meeting. As we inaugurate the board today, it is pleasing to know that all the members of this board have had a stint with Parliament and therefore have an in-depth appreciation of the task ahead of them. The majority and minority leaders were part of the previous board, which included Honorable Hakman Osu Ajiman, former member and former Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, Chairman of COCO Board, and Chairman of the Council of Elders of the MPP, and Honorable Abina Osei Asare, Member of Parliament, and the immediate past Deputy Minister of Finance, and now nominee to the same position. To replace Honorable Hakman Osu Ajiman and Honorable Abina Osei Asare, we now have Honorable Abraham Osei Edu, a former majority leader and leader of the House, and Honorable Johnson Asedu Nketia, also a former Deputy Minister of Agriculture and former senior member of this House. In attendance to support the board are Ms. Estelle Appiah, former Director of Drafting of the Attorney General's Department and the Minister of Justice, now a consultant of international repute, and our own, the two Deputy Speakers of Parliament, who have happily worked with so far. These are men and women of varied and extensive experience in their respective fields of endeavor, and I have no doubt that they will place their experiences at the service of this board to enrich policies and decisions of the board, and to enable us to push through the implementation of the strategic objectives of Parliament and the parliamentary service.
Well, the parliamentary service exists to facilitate the work of Parliament through the provision of support services to the House, including its committees and agencies, for the purpose of ensuring full and effective exercise of the powers of Parliament. Majority Leader Osei Mensah Bonsu wants the House to address the high attrition rate.
As we said, even in legislation, attributable in the main, Mr. Speaker, to, broadly speaking, the lack of capacity on the part of many of our compatriots. We must admit that the high attrition rate that members of Parliament are subjected to is not comforting and is not enriching our democracy. Mr. Speaker, I believe it's something that we must jointly address, in particular relating to the various political parties. You spend time in identifying the credentials of Hakman Osu Ajiman as a chair of the Council of Elders of the MPP. Today we have the General Secretary of a political party, Johnson Asedu Nketia. You didn't mention that. But Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that we engage the political parties in this discourse to really relate to the attrition rate of members of Parliament. Unfortunately, the constitutions of the two political parties, both MPP and NDC, is not helping to grow our Parliament. And let's not kid ourselves. Every executive will be happy with a weak legislature. And we must strengthen Parliament going forward. Mr. Speaker, there are constitutional burdens and there are statutory burdens that we have imposed on ourselves. In the performance of the oversight functions of Parliament, arguably the best vehicle to achieve this is the committee systems. How strong is our committee systems? We need to liberate our committees to work proactively in order to make Parliament relevant. If there are strictures that we've imposed on ourselves, it becomes difficult for the committees to work. Speaker, with your own experience, I believe this new board should be able to address these salient issues. Let's strand all of them out and attend to them to reposition the Parliament of Ghana, Speaker, to make us relevant, as I said, in the governance architecture of our nation. I don't intend to be overly loquacious. Mr. Speaker, you've given us a treatise, and I think we can live with it. And so you didn't want me to use the word treatise. I withdraw and apologize on that. But I think the statement that you gave is all-encompassing and should be a useful guide to all of us. Speaker, once again, I thank you, and I believe bonding together and banding together, we can attain greater heights for the Parliament of Ghana.
Majority Leader Oseiche Mensah-Bonsu there, while the Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu says the House must work to build the capacity of the MPs as well as the staff of the service.
And cooperation to work with you assiduously to make this parliament more responsive, more accountable, and more transparent in serving the needs of the Ghanaian people. As I listen to you, I observe that you are not satisfied with the oversight role of Parliament. We accept that as our first challenge, that we work together to improve oversight for greater accountability, particularly in the exercise of executive authority in Ghana. And as you yourself rightly noted, we will build upon the gains made by Professor Mike Okoye in the promotion of the private members bill, and we encourage as many members as possible to promote and sponsor similar bills for the good of our parliament.